The shoreline keeps moving, but not in the way anyone expected. Where water once stretched wide and steady, pale bands of exposed rock now trace a slow and unmistakable retreat. How far can a reservoir fall before its purpose begins to fracture? How much strain can a system absorb before the effects ripple beyond the canyon walls? And what happens when one of the largest reservoirs in the United States reaches levels not seen in a generation? At Lake Powell, the numbers have shifted in ways that demand attention. The reservoir, formed by the construction of Glen Canyon Dam, has dropped to elevations that mark its lowest point in roughly 25 years. The decline is not sudden, nor is it isolated to a single season. It is the cumulative result of years of reduced inflow, persistent drought conditions, and sustained demand placed on the waters of the Colorado River. Measured in elevation, the surface of Lake Powell has hovered near approximately 3,520 feet above sea level, equivalent to about 1,073 meters. That figure represents a substantial drop from its full pool elevation of roughly 3,700 feet, or about 1,128 meters. The difference between those two levels is not simply a vertical measure. It translates into a vast reduction in stored water volume, altering the reservoir's capacity to meet downstream obligations and maintain hydroelectric generation. The exposed canyon walls reveal more than just the passage of time. The distinct bathtub ring, a chalky white outline marking previous water levels, has grown wider and more pronounced. In some areas, the ring spans over 100 feet, or roughly 30 meters, vertically. This visual marker has become one of the clearest indicators of the reservoir's decline, offering a stark comparison between past abundance and current scarcity. Inflow into Lake Powell is largely dependent on snowpack accumulation in the Rocky Mountains. Over recent years, snowpack levels have fluctuated, with several seasons producing below-average runoff. When snow melts in the spring and early summer, it feeds tributaries that eventually flow into the Colorado River system. Reduced snowpack means less water entering the system at its source, and that deficit carries downstream. By the time water reaches Lake Powell, the cumulative effect becomes evident in declining reservoir levels. At the same time, demand has remained relatively consistent. Water from the Colorado River supports millions of people across multiple states, supplying agricultural, municipal, and industrial needs. Releases from Glen Canyon Dam are carefully managed to meet legal and operational requirements, ensuring that downstream reservoirs, including Lake Mead, receive necessary flows. Even as Lake Powell declines, these releases continue, contributing to the gradual drawdown. The relationship between Lake Powell and Lake Mead is central to understanding the broader implications. Together they function as key storage components within the Colorado River basin. When one reservoir drops significantly, it places additional pressure on the other. Lake Mead has also experienced historically low levels in recent years, creating a situation where both reservoirs are simultaneously under strain. This dual decline raises concerns about the system's ability to stabilize under prolonged drought conditions. Hydroelectric generation at Glen Canyon Dam is directly tied to water levels in Lake Powell. The turbines rely on sufficient hydraulic head, the pressure created by the height of the water above them. As the reservoir level falls, that pressure decreases, reducing the efficiency and output of the turbines. If water levels approach what is known as minimum power pool, approximately 3,490 feet, or about 1,064 meters, the dam's ability to generate electricity becomes severely limited. At even lower levels, known as dead pool, water can no longer pass through the turbines or outlet works in a controlled manner. Current levels, while not yet at those critical thresholds, are uncomfortably close compared to historical norms. The margin between present conditions and operational limits has narrowed, prompting increased monitoring and adjustments in water management strategies. The implications extend beyond energy production. Reduced hydroelectric output can affect power availability and pricing across regions that rely on this source of electricity. The physical geography of Lake Powell also plays a role in how the decline manifests. The reservoir spans over 180 miles, or about 290 kilometers when full, winding through narrow canyons and branching into numerous side arms. As water levels drop, these side canyons become isolated, transforming into disconnected pools or dry channels. Boat access becomes restricted, mariners must relocate or extend infrastructure, and recreational use is significantly altered. Sedimentation is another factor that becomes more visible as water recedes. Over time, sediment carried by the Colorado River settles at the bottom of the reservoir. As levels fall, previously submerged sediment deposits can become exposed, altering the landscape and affecting water quality. These deposits can also influence the storage capacity of the reservoir, gradually reducing the volume available for water storage. Climate patterns across the southwestern United States have shown a trend toward warmer temperatures and altered precipitation cycles. Higher temperatures increase evaporation rates, further reducing the amount of water retained in reservoirs like Lake Powell. Evaporation losses can account for hundreds of thousands of acre-feet of water annually, equivalent to billions of gallons or several billion liters. When combined with reduced inflow, this creates a compounding effect that accelerates the decline. The operational framework governing Lake Powell involves a series of agreements and guidelines designed to balance competing needs. These include provisions for water delivery, reservoir management, and contingency planning during periods of shortage. Adjustments to release schedules, coordinated operations between reservoirs, and conservation measures have all been implemented in response to declining levels. Despite these efforts, the scale of the challenge remains significant. The visual transformation of Lake Powell has drawn attention not only from those directly dependent on its waters, but also from observers tracking long-term environmental changes. Satellite imagery and aerial photography provide clear evidence of the reservoir's contraction over time. Comparisons between images taken decades apart reveal a marked reduction in surface area, with some estimates indicating a loss of more than half of its original capacity during peak drought periods. Infrastructure built around the reservoir has had to adapt to these changing conditions. Boat ramps that once extended into deep water now end far from the shoreline. Marinas have been relocated or modified to accommodate shifting water levels. In some cases, facilities have been temporarily closed due to lack of access. These adjustments reflect the practical challenges of operating within an environment where water levels are no longer predictable within historical ranges. Downstream effects are closely tied to the management of Lake Powell. Releases from Glen Canyon Dam are essential for maintaining flows through the Grand Canyon and beyond. These flows support ecosystems, recreational activities, and water deliveries to lower basin states. Balancing the need to conserve water in Lake Powell with the requirement to sustain downstream conditions presents an ongoing challenge. Reductions in release volumes can help stabilize reservoir levels, but may have consequences for downstream users. The legal and administrative structure governing the Colorado River Basin is complex, involving multiple states and agreements that date back decades. These frameworks were established during periods when water availability was assumed to be more consistent than current conditions suggest. As Lake Powell reaches levels not seen in a quarter century, questions arise about how these agreements will function under sustained stress. The reservoir's decline also has implications for water quality. Lower water levels can lead to higher concentrations of dissolved minerals and increased temperatures, affecting both aquatic ecosystems and the suitability of water for various uses. Stratification within the reservoir, where layers of water differ in temperature and composition, can become more pronounced, influencing oxygen levels and habitat conditions for fish and other organisms. Navigation through Lake Powell has become more complex as channels narrow and previously submerged hazards emerge. Rock formations, sandbars, and other obstacles that were once well below the surface now pose risks to boats. Updated mapping and increased caution are necessary for safe navigation, reflecting the changing nature of the reservoir's physical environment. The broader hydrological context cannot be separated from what is happening at Lake Powell. The Colorado River Basin has experienced one of the driest periods in recorded history over the past 2 decades. This extended dry spell, often referred to as a megadrought, has reduced river flows and reservoir levels across the system. While individual years may bring temporary relief, the overall trend has been toward reduced water availability. Efforts to address the decline include conservation initiatives aimed at reducing water use across the basin. Agricultural efficiency improvements, urban water conservation programs, and changes in water allocation practices have all been part of the response. These measures, while important, operate within the constraints of a system facing reduced supply. The scale of Lake Powell means that even significant inflow events may take time to produce noticeable increases in water levels. A single season of above-average snowpack can provide a temporary boost, but sustained recovery would require multiple consecutive years of favorable conditions. Until such a pattern emerges, the reservoir remains vulnerable to further declines. As the waterline continues to shift, the exposed landscape offers a visible record of change. Canyons that were once submerged for decades are re-emerging, revealing geological features and historical sites that had been hidden beneath the water. These changes underscore the dynamic nature of the reservoir and the broader system it supports. The current situation at Lake Powell represents more than a temporary fluctuation. It reflects a convergence of climatic, hydrological, and operational factors that have been building over time. With levels at their lowest point in roughly 25 years, the reservoir stands as a clear indicator of the challenges facing water management in the region. As the decline continues at Lake Powell, the operational balance within the broader Colorado River system becomes increasingly delicate. Water managers must account not only for present conditions but also for the possibility that current inflow patterns may persist longer than previously anticipated. Storage levels are no longer treated as temporary fluctuations but as indicators of a shifting baseline that influences every downstream calculation tied to allocation, delivery, and retention. The structure that governs releases from Glen Canyon Dam depends on maintaining specific elevation thresholds. As reservoir levels drop closer to operational limits, adjustments are made to preserve what remains in storage while still complying with delivery requirements. These adjustments can include reduced annual release volumes, modified timing of water discharges, and coordinated actions with upstream and downstream reservoirs. Each of these measures is designed to slow the rate of decline, but none can fully offset the combined pressures of reduced inflow and sustained demand. Water accounting across the Colorado River Basin reflects a system that was originally structured during a period of comparatively higher river flow. Allocations agreed upon decades ago were based on assumptions that do not consistently align with present hydrological conditions. As a result, the total committed use of water often exceeds the average annual supply during extended dry periods. This imbalance becomes more visible when reservoirs like Lake Powell drop to levels that limit flexibility within the system. Storage capacity at Lake Powell is measured in millions of acre-feet, with full capacity exceeding 24 million acre-feet, or approximately 29 billion cubic meters. At current levels, the reservoir holds a significantly reduced fraction of that volume. The loss of stored water affects not only immediate supply, but also the system's ability to buffer against future drought years. In years with below-average inflow, stored reserves act as a stabilizing force. When those reserves are diminished, the system becomes more vulnerable to rapid changes. Evaporation remains a persistent and often underestimated factor. The surface area of Lake Powell, even at reduced levels, is extensive. Under high temperatures common to the region, water loss through evaporation can reach several feet of depth annually across wide sections of the reservoir. This translates into large volumes of water effectively removed from the system without being used for any productive purpose. When combined with seepage into surrounding geological formations, these losses contribute to the gradual reduction in stored water. As reservoir levels fall, intake structures that draw water for various purposes must operate under increasingly constrained conditions. These structures are designed with specific elevation ranges in mind. When water levels drop below optimal ranges, modifications or temporary solutions may be required to maintain functionality. In extreme scenarios, access to water through certain outlets may become limited, complicating both water delivery and power generation. At Lake Mead, downstream conditions mirror many of the challenges observed at Lake Powell. Releases from Glen Canyon Dam play a critical role in stabilizing Lake Mead, yet those releases also contribute to the depletion of Lake Powell when inflow is insufficient to replenish what is sent downstream. This interconnected dynamic forces continuous recalibration of release strategies, often prioritizing system stability over localized recovery. The geographic spread of the Colorado River Basin means that the effects of declining reservoir levels extend far beyond the immediate vicinity of Lake Powell. Agricultural regions depend on consistent water deliveries for irrigation. Urban areas rely on allocations that are calculated based on reservoir storage and projected inflows. Industrial operations also depend on predictable access to water. When reservoir levels drop, each of these sectors faces increased uncertainty, requiring adjustments that can have economic and logistical consequences. Changes in shoreline configuration at Lake Powell have altered sediment transport patterns within the reservoir. As water recedes, previously submerged channels may redirect flow in ways that influence where sediment accumulates. Over time, this can create uneven distribution of sediment deposits, affecting both water depth and navigation routes. Areas that were once deep enough for unrestricted passage may become shallow, requiring updated mapping and increased monitoring. Temperature variations within the reservoir have also become more pronounced. Lower water levels can lead to quicker warming of surface layers, particularly during extended periods of high ambient temperature. This can affect dissolved oxygen levels and influence biological activity within the water. While these changes occur gradually, their cumulative impact can alter the internal dynamics of the reservoir environment. The long-term trend across the basin suggests that variability is becoming a defining characteristic rather than an exception. Periods of above-average precipitation are interspersed with extended dry intervals, creating a pattern that challenges traditional water management approaches. Reservoirs like Lake Powell are designed to smooth out these fluctuations, but their effectiveness depends on maintaining sufficient storage capacity. When levels drop too low, that buffering capability is reduced. Operational responses have included coordinated releases from upstream reservoirs to supplement inflow into Lake Powell during critical periods. These releases are carefully timed to maximize their impact, but they are limited by the available storage in upstream systems. This highlights the interconnected nature of the basin, where actions taken in one area can influence conditions across a wide geographic range. Infrastructure adaptations continue as water levels shift. Marinas have extended floating docks, relocated anchoring points, and adjusted access routes to accommodate changing shoreline positions. Boat ramps have been lengthened or temporarily closed, depending on water accessibility. These adjustments require ongoing maintenance and investment, reflecting the need to adapt to conditions that are no longer static. Recreational patterns at Lake Powell have shifted alongside these changes. Areas that were once central hubs of activity may become less accessible, while newly exposed regions offer different opportunities. The overall footprint of usable water surface has contracted, influencing how and where activities take place. These changes, while gradual, are consistent with the broader pattern of declining reservoir levels. Monitoring systems have become increasingly sophisticated, incorporating satellite data, real-time sensors, and predictive modeling to track changes in reservoir conditions. These tools provide detailed insights into inflow patterns, evaporation rates, and storage levels, enabling more responsive management decisions. Despite these advances, the fundamental constraint remains the volume of water entering the system. The scale of reduction observed over the past 2 decades places current conditions within a broader historical context. While fluctuations have occurred throughout the history of Lake Powell, the sustained nature of recent declines distinguishes this period from earlier cycles. The combination of reduced inflow, higher temperatures, and consistent demand has created a prolonged imbalance that continues to influence reservoir levels. Water delivery obligations remain a central factor in determining how Lake Powell is managed. Agreements require specific volumes of water to be delivered downstream over defined periods. Meeting these obligations while preserving reservoir storage requires careful calibration of release schedules. When inflow is low, maintaining this balance becomes increasingly difficult, often requiring trade-offs that affect both upstream and downstream conditions. The exposure of previously submerged land has also revealed infrastructure and natural features that had been hidden for decades. Old river channels, rock formations, and remnants of earlier landscapes have reappeared, offering a visual record of how the reservoir has changed over time. These exposures are a direct result of declining water levels and serve as physical indicators of the broader trend. As conditions continue to evolve, the margin for operational flexibility remains narrow. Reservoir levels fluctuate within a constrained range, with limited capacity to absorb further declines without triggering more restrictive measures. Each season of below-average inflow reduces available options, reinforcing the importance of sustained monitoring and adaptive management. If you found this breakdown clear and informative, support the channel by liking the video, sharing it with others, and subscribing for more updates. Tap that hype icon to help this video reach a wider audience and keep more in-depth coverage coming.